The silver raven whistle lay safely in David's pocket. None of the boys could stop thinking about the mysterious fifth watcher. "Do you think we'll ever know who it is?" Simon asked as they crossed the school lawns after breakfast. Peter smiled. "I think whoever they are, they want us to discover the answer ourselves." Miss Blyton, who had joined them for their morning walk, nodded thoughtfully. "Some mysteries reveal themselves only when the time is right. Magic has a habit of waiting until people are ready." A cool breeze swept across the lawns. For just a moment, the boys thought they heard children laughing, although the grounds were almost empty. Miss Blyton paused. "They're listening again," she whispered. "Who?" David asked. "The old staff of Heiden." The boys exchanged puzzled glances. As they passed the headmistress's study, the polished oak door stood slightly open. Inside, Miss Bowflower sat writing neatly in the school logbook. Behind her stood an old oak cabinet with a glass door. Resting inside were the school's traditional cane and a well-worn carpet slipper with a black rubber sole. Generations of Heiden boys knew exactly what they represented. Throughout the school's history, the cane and slipper had been symbols of discipline and responsibility. Every punishment had once been carefully recorded in the punishment book, and every headmistress had believed that discipline should be fair, never cruel. Miss Bowflower believed that praise should always come before punishment, but she also believed that order and respect were essential if Heiden was to remain the happy school it had always been. As the boys walked away, Simon glanced back. I could have sworn someone else was standing beside her. Peter looked. For a split second, he thought he saw an elderly headmistress dressed in black Victorian robes, carrying a long, supple cane beneath one arm. Then she vanished. Miss Blyton smiled. "You've just seen one of Heiden's guardians." "The ghosts?" "Yes. They still watch over the school." Lessons passed quickly. During history, Miss Blyton spoke about the villages surrounding Heiden and how they had changed over hundreds of years. She also spoke about old Sussex folklore. People once believed every ancient woodland held a wise woman or cunning man. She opened a faded leather pouch. Inside were sprigs of rowan, dried mugwort, and a tiny piece of polished jet. These were once carried for protection. Peter noticed something unusual. An old map hanging on the classroom wall showed a small woodland beyond the school grounds. It was marked simply, Ashcombe Wood. Peter quietly showed the map to David. "Miss Ashcombe," David nodded. "It can't be a coincidence." Suddenly every candle in the classroom flickered, although there was no wind. A faint smell of lavender drifted through the room. The ghostly outline of another former headmistress appeared beside the map. She wore a long grey dress. In one hand she held an old school register. In the other rested a rubber-soled carpet slipper. She gave Peter the smallest nod before fading into the wall. Miss Blyton did not seem surprised. "They approve of your curiosity." That evening, after prep, the four friends returned to the hidden library beneath the chapel. As they descended the winding stone staircase, they noticed something new. Blue witch lights floated silently through the darkness. They looked like tiny stars. "They weren't here before," Andrew whispered. "They're guiding us," Miss Ashcombe replied. The ancient green book was waiting. This time it glowed with a soft emerald light. Around it someone had placed a circle of white chalk covered with ancient pagan symbols. Small quartz crystals stood at the four directions. Bundles of rosemary and mugwort hung from the ceiling. The air smelled faintly of incense. Peter gently rested his hand upon the cover. Immediately the room filled with whispers, not frightening whispers. Friendly ones, the voices of every keeper who had protected Heiden. The book opened by itself. Green letters slowly appeared. "Every keeper remembers." Another sentence followed. "Magic binds the circle." A third line appeared. "Those who protect Heiden are never truly gone." Finally came the last instruction. "Enter the Hall of Memories." The oak door at the far end of the library slowly opened by itself. Miss Ashcombe smiled. "It is ready." Beyond lay a magnificent circular hall. Unlike the library, it was filled with warm golden light. There were no lamps, no candles. The light simply existed. Above them, hundreds of ravens made entirely of silver light flew slowly around the domed ceiling. Every few moments, one disappeared into the stone before another emerged elsewhere. Ancient pentacles, oak leaves, moon symbols, and protective runes had been carved into the walls. Each glowed with quiet magic. Beautiful murals covered every wall. Each told another chapter of Heiden's history. The founding of the school, the planting of the great cedar, the first boys arriving by horse and carriage, the chapel, the hidden library. One mural showed an early headmistress standing proudly before the school with a supple cane beneath her arm, while a rubber-soled slipper rested upon her desk. Behind her stood smiling pupils. Below the painting were carved words: "Discipline without fairness is weakness. Fairness without kindness is empty." Nearby stood another mural. It showed several former teachers gathered around a full moon, quietly casting a blessing over Heiden. Oak leaves swirled around them, a raven perched upon each shoulder. "These headmistresses were witches," Simon whispered. Miss Ashcombe smiled. Many of Heiden's finest teachers quietly practiced the old craft. They protected the school with wisdom and a little magic. In the centre stood a round stone table. Upon it rested 4 crystal bowls. Each contained perfectly clear water. "These," said Miss Ashcombe, "are the memory pools." Peter looked puzzled. "What do they do?" "They reveal truth, but only truth remembered with kindness." David looked into the first bowl. The water shimmered. Heiden appeared many decades earlier. Boys played cricket beneath the cedar tree. Teachers laughed together. Mrs. Bellamy carried lemonade across the lawn. Near the pavilion stood an elderly headmistress with her cane tucked beneath her arm. She smiled warmly before returning it to her study. "The school always tried to teach first," Miss Ashcombe explained. "The cane and slipper were part of another age, but they were never meant to replace wisdom." Andrew looked into another bowl. Heiden during the Second World War. Children evacuated from London arrived frightened and exhausted. Teachers welcomed them. Miss Ashcombe, much younger, wrapped blankets around them. Behind her stood the ghost of an even older headmistress. Her transparent figure carried a lantern. The old cane rested quietly against her desk. She raised her hand in blessing. Protective symbols glowed around every building. "No bomb ever struck Heiden," Miss Ashcombe said softly. "The circle kept watch." Peter gazed into the third bowl. 4 young keepers stood beneath the ancient oak. Beside them stood an elderly gardener wearing the silver raven brooch. His beard was white, his eyes sparkled. Around his walking stick climbed glowing green ivy. Tiny ravens circled above him. "He was the 5th watcher," Peter whispered. "Yes," said Miss Ashcombe, "Mr. Samuel Rowan. He knew more woodland magic than anyone before or since. He protected this place for nearly 50 years. The gardener smiled before drawing a glowing pentacle in the air. Immediately the image faded. David looked into the final bowl. Nothing happened. Then tiny ripples spread across the surface. A future appeared. The forgotten garden flourished. Children laughed. The hidden library remained safe. The old protective circle glowed brighter than ever. Standing beside Miss Bowflower were several transparent headmistresses from long ago. Each carried either a school register, a lantern, a cane, or a carpet slipper. Not as objects of fear, but as reminders of Heiden's long history and of the responsibility every generation inherited. The ghosts smiled proudly. Above them, ravens circled through the night sky. "What does it mean?" Simon asked. Miss Ashcombe smiled. "It means the guardians never truly leave. The living teach. The departed watch. And the magic continues." As the boys prepared to leave, Peter noticed words carved around the edge of the stone table. He read them aloud. Knowledge teaches. Friendship strengthens. Magic protects. Kindness endures. David smiled. I think those words describe Heiden better than any school motto. Miss Blyton nodded. I couldn't agree more. As they climbed the ancient staircase, they heard footsteps behind them. Turning around, they saw nearly a dozen ghostly teachers standing silently within the Hall of Memories. Victorian headmistresses, Edwardian schoolmistresses, teachers from the 1920s, the wartime staff. Some carried lanterns, some carried old lesson books. One or two still held the supple canes, or the familiar rubber-soled slippers that had once symbolized Heiden's strict discipline. Yet every one of them smiled kindly. Together they slowly raised a hand in farewell. Then they vanished like morning mist. Far beyond the school walls, beneath the ancient oaks of Ashcombe Wood, the mysterious fifth watcher paused. He raised his lantern. Green witch-fire danced among the trees. Owls called from the darkness. Ancient runes briefly glowed upon the bark of the oldest oak. The circle is whole once more, the watcher murmured. But Heiden will always need guardians. The living and the dead. High above the school, a lone raven circled beneath the stars before disappearing into the Sussex night. Back in her study, Miss Bowflower closed the school register and placed it carefully upon her desk. She glanced for a moment towards the old cane and the well-worn rubber-soled carpet slipper resting quietly in the cabinet beside generations of punishment books, then looked towards the moonlit window. Outside, she thought she saw the smiling ghosts of several former headmistresses crossing the lawns together before fading into silver mist. She simply smiled. "Good night," she whispered. Somewhere deep beneath Heiden, the ancient green book quietly turned another page by itself, and a fresh line of glowing emerald words appeared.